graduate student, and I conducted the evaluation with Hannah, and I'm just here to report on those findings and the results of the evaluation with you all here today. So I'll start with this first part. It says of assessment methods. This just gives us an overall walkthrough of the evaluation process with Hannah. So this first part of the evaluation is the social developmental history. This was completed by you, and it just gives us a little bit of background information about Hannah. Thank you for filling that out and returning it to us. This next part is called the KBC, also known as the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children. This just gives us an idea of Hannah's cognitive skills, how she processes information. This next part is called the CTOP. It's a comprehensive test of phonological processing. This just gives us an idea of how Hannah is able to work with sounds and words. Just assessing those basic reading skills, basic literacy skills such as reading, spelling, and comprehension, so understanding things that she's reading. And so this last part is called the BASC, also known as the Behavior Assessment System for Children. This was also completed by you. Thank you for filling this out. This just gives us an understanding of how Hannah is doing behaviorally, socially, within those areas, within school and within the home. All right, we can start here with the background information. Again, this was filled out by you for the social developmental history. This just gives us an idea of Hannah within her home life, language, early developmental, medical information, and educational history and social behavioral history. So some of the things I want to highlight here, starting with the early developmental information. So you reported that Hannah experienced some delays during, you experienced some birthing complications during delivery. She was born with a smaller birth weight. And then you also reported that Hannah demonstrated slower development in several areas such as walking, talking, physical activity, toileting, different areas like that. Medical information, there was nothing concerning here. Is there any information you'd like to add to this area? Has anything changed with the medical information so far? Okay. And then below we have the educational history and the social behavioral history. For educational history, I wanted to highlight that you noted that Hannah did receive intervention services in pre-K, and then as she transitioned into elementary school, had some formal special education services addressing certain needs, and then those services were discontinued as she entered middle school and then throughout high school. And then in the social and behavioral history, you noted how just expressing some concerns centered around Hannah's difficulty focusing, maintaining attention, and then you often having to redirect her back to tasks. Is this still consistent with how she is now? Okay. All right, we'll move down. We'll go to page 2. And this just talks about the behavioral observations during our time during the evaluation. The evaluation took a total of about 2 hours and 30 minutes. So around that area. Was really impressed with how Hannah was during this time. She's very persistent during tasks. kept appropriate engagement, was very respectful, very sweet, had consistent response time across the different tasks that she was given, and also engaged in some casual conversation. It was just a great opportunity to learn a little bit more about Hannah. During our time, she discussed some interests in archery, how that's an activity that she enjoys. So overall, really enjoyed working with her during this evaluation. I also wanted to note that towards the end of our evaluation, again, it was 2.5 hours, so she just displayed some signs of fatigue, such as yawning, and then I had also asked her, was she feeling tired toward the end of this evaluation, and she verbally expressed that she was feeling a little tired, so just wanted to keep that in mind. Overall, those are some behaviors that I observed during our testing time. All right, on page 3, we'll start with this first assessment. Again, it's called the KBC, the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children. This is also known as a cognitive test or an intelligence test. This test overall just gives us an understanding of Hannah's cognitive abilities, how she thinks, and how she processes information. So this cognitive assessment consists of 5 different areas. First area is called sequential. The second area is simultaneous. Third area is learning. Fourth area is planning. And the fifth area is knowledge, also known as crystallized ability. So those 5 areas are all put together and creates the fluid crystallized index. The FCI just gives us an overall view of Hannah's cognitive abilities. So we'll go down and discuss her scores in those 5 areas. Also wanted to note that here's just a summary of the scores that she was able to obtain. This shows the range of the scores, and then this just gives like a label to those scores. So say like she made a score of 85, that would fall within the average range. And then this is just a picture that kind of gives us an idea of where her scores fall on this scale. All right, this next page, on page 4, just gives us a summary of Hannah's scores on this cognitive test. We're really just going to want to focus on the areas in bold right here, and then also just go back to that fluid crystallized index score. So we'll start with this first part. This first part is sequential. It measures how Hannah can remember and work with information in a correct order. For example, Hannah was asked to repeat numbers in the same order that they were presented. So I would, for example, say 5, 1, 8, and she'd have to repeat those numbers back to me in the same order. In this area, she obtained a score of 88, which places her within the average range. This just indicates that, this just suggests to us that Hannah is, falls within Hannah is displaying skills within this area, fall within the average range, just tells us that this is typical development in this area for her age. So we have no concerns here. So moving on to page 5, this is again another area in this cognitive test called planning. And this area just measures how Hannah can think logically and just solve problems. For example, she was given the task of completing stories by arranging the pictures in the correct order. So going back to that planning ability and how to logically solve problems. Within this area, she obtained a score of 90, which places her within the average range. This just tells us again, and we can go back to this chart here, which shows where her score falls, 90, so within this average range, which just tells us that her skills in this area fall within an area that is typical, area functioning that's typical for her age. So we found no concerns here in this area as well. This third area, called simultaneous, it measures how Hannah can make sense of what she can see and solve problems that involve spatial thinking. And this area also gives an understanding of how she visualizes information and how visualize things and how see how things fit together. For example, Hannah was shown pictures of structures made of blocks and was asked to count how many blocks were used to build each structure. And then also some of those blocks were partially hidden. So overall in that structure, she had to tell me how many blocks were in that structure. Just again, getting an understanding of how she visualizes things and how things fit together. So within this area, she obtained a score of 115, which falls within the average range. Again, this just tells her that, and this just tells us that in the skill area, it's falls within typical development for her age. So we found no concerns here. The next area in this cognitive test is called learning. It measures how Hannah can learn new information and then remember it later on. So this kind of relates to skills, everyday activity skills, like remembering instructions from earlier in the day, learning new concepts in school, recalling information from previous lessons, just different things like that. And so within this area, she obtained a score of 105, which fell within the average range again, like on this chart. And again, this just tells us for the area of learning, she is developing skills within this area that are typical for her age. So we also found no concerns in this area. Do you have any questions so far? Okay. So in this last area, it's called knowledge. It just measures how much information, it just measures how much information Hannah has learned over time and how well she can use that knowledge. For example, she was given a task called riddles, where she would listen to verbal cues describing an object or concept and had to figure out what was being described. So for example, I'd give her a riddle such as, what's yellow in the sky and is bright? She would have to say sun. She obtained a score of 102, which falls within the average range. Again, this just suggests to us that within the area of knowledge, she is developing skills within this area that's typical for her age. So we found no concerns here. If we turn to page 6, again, this is her fluid crystallized index. This is just taking all of those 5 areas, putting them together, and is giving us an overall estimate of Hannah's cognitive abilities, how she thinks and processes information. Overall, she obtained a score of 100, which falls within the average range. This score just suggests to us that her overall cognitive ability, it falls within the typical range for her age. So for her overall cognitive ability, we found no concerns. After all of this information, do you have any questions? Okay. So on page 6, we have another part of our evaluation. Again, it's called the CTOP. comprehensive test of phonological processing. This test uses 3 areas: phonological awareness, phonological memory, and then rapid symbol naming. These 3 areas measure how a child works with sounds in words, which serve as the foundational skills for literacy, so such as reading, spelling, reading comprehension, so understanding texts that she reads. So this chart here gives a summary of the descriptions. This is a list of the range of scale scores and composite scores. They're seen right here as well. And this just ties a description to those scores. So say she obtains a composite score of 85, it would fall within the below average range. And so below that is just a summary of Hannah's scores on the C-top. And then on the next page, we're also going to follow this area in bold. And then on the next page, it's just going to describe those scores. So we'll leave this here to reference back to. So the first part of the C-top is called phonological awareness. Again, this consists of 3 different activities that show, that gives us an understanding of how Hannah can recognize sounds in words and manipulate those sounds in words. For example, the first activity, Hannah needed to say words after removing specific sounds. So say she was given the word cat without the k. She'd have to say at, leaving that k sound out. The next activity involved blending sounds together. So kind of for using the word cat again, she would have to blend the sounds of different words. So she'd be given different sounds, k, at, and having to blend that together and produce the answer. And then there was a third activity where Hannah could identify specific sounds within spoken words. For this area, she received a combined score, so using all 3 of those tests combined together, obtained a score of 92. This fell within the average range, indicating that Hannah is demonstrating those foundational reading skills. Again, blending sounds together, taking them apart. All right, the other area in the C-top is called phonological memory. This consists of 2 different activities that measure different aspects of sound-based memory skills. So for example, one activity called memory for digits shows how well Hannah can remember and repeat back sequences of numbers. So this kind of goes back to a small test from the previous, one of the previous tests that I gave her. It was just, I give a list of numbers such as like 8, 2, 1, and then she'd have to repeat it back to me in the same order. And then another test in this area called non-word repetition measures Hannah's ability to repeat made-up words of varying lengths. So she'd have to repeat, first it would start off with small made-up words, and then as the activity would go on, the made-up words would become bigger in length, and she'd have to still reproduce those. So in this area, she obtained a combined score of 88, which fell within the below average range compared to other children her age. And so this score may suggest that Hannah may be experiencing a little bit more difficulty than her peers when it comes to holding sound-based information in memory. And so this score also suggests that might find reading skills challenging when remembering spoken, when remembering it spoken to her. This kind of is also associated with like remembering spoken directions or following multiple step instructions, just holding sounds in mind while trying to sound out unfamiliar words during reading could be associated with this. Do you have any questions so far about that? Okay. So this last part in our CTOP test is called rapid symbolic naming. It consists of 2 different activities that measure how quickly she can name familiar symbols, like numbers and letters when seen on a page. For example, the rapid letter naming activity required Hannah to name letters quickly while being timed. And the same goes for the other test, but it also, instead of her naming letters quickly, she would name numbers quickly while being timed. So she obtained a score of 52 in this area, combined score of 52, which falls within the poor range. So this indicates some difficulty with quickly retrieving and naming familiar symbols, kind of what those 2 tests measured. And these skills are important skills related to reading fluency, so how smoothly and quickly she can read texts. Now, this difficulty in this area doesn't reflect her intelligence or effort, but rather indicates a specific processing difficulty. I also wanted to note that in this area, I wanted to note 2 things in this area. So the first thing I wanted to note that during testing, I noticed that her approach to this task, the rapid symbolic naming, so naming the letters and naming the numbers, her approach to this task, I observed her being a little bit more careful, trying to get the letters and the numbers right. And so this may have affected her overall speed with the score, which is taken into account when scoring. I also wanted to note as well that these were the last few tasks within our assessment session. And again, she showed some signs of fatigue during this portion of the evaluation. Just wanted to mention that too, and keep that in mind when taking into account this score. Do you have any questions? Again, any comments? Okay, we'll move on to our last part of the assessment on page 7. It's known as the BASC, or the Behavior Assessment System for Children. This was that parent rating skill that you were given and that you filled out. So this behavior rating skill just gives us an understanding of Hannah's well-being, her behavior patterns, and then her social skills. We turn to page 8. So this is also just another summary of the descriptive terms, and then this is a summary of Hannah's scores during this parent rating form. So for example, score of 43 falls within that average range. And so on page 9, we'll put this there, reference back to. On page 9, we'll just talk about her scores during this rating form that you filled out for us. So this first part is externalizing problems. So this just covers areas like hyperactivity, aggression, and conduct problems. And so this externalized problem is a combined score of these three areas. And this combined score fell within the average range, indicating that overall, from your ratings about Hannah, she doesn't report any significant concerns with externally directed behavior, such as hyperactivity, aggression, cognitive problems. In these three areas as well, she was scored within the average range for these areas. So we found no concerns here. All right, this next area is internalized problems. This covers areas such as anxiety, depression, and somatization. So, for example, when a student complains a lot about, their stomach being upset, rapid heartbeat, different things like that. And so all these, so these three scores combined together into the internalized problem combined score fell within the average range. And so this just suggests that according to your report of Hannah, she doesn't appear to experience significant internalizing difficulties. And then so within these specific areas as well, she scored within the average range of these areas. So we don't see any concerns with internalizing problems. Is that still pretty consistent with what was reported here? Okay. All right, we move on to page 10. This is the Behavior Symptom Index. And so this just looks at things like attention problems, atypicality, and withdrawal. So combining all three of these scores makes a combined score in the Behavioral Symptoms Index of 52, which falls within the average range, suggesting that overall you reported that there are no significant behavior concerns across multiple domains in this area. So looking specifically at these different areas, for attention problems, she scored within the average range. So she's demonstrating age-appropriate attention and concentration abilities. For atypicality, she scored within the average range for this area, which just indicates that Hannah, from your reportings, typically demonstrates age-appropriate thought processes and so within this area of withdrawal, I'd like to point out that within this specific area, her scores fall within the clinically significant range, which usually warrants some follow-ups. This just tells us that through your reportings, Hannah may display behaviors where she's generally alone or has difficulty making friends or is unwilling to join group activities. These different types of behaviors fall within the area of withdrawal. And so clinically significant scores within this area usually warrant some concerns regarding social engagement and may indicate some social isolation. Is that still consistent with how you feel about Hannah? Okay. All right, this next area is adaptive skills. It's also split within this page. So the overall adaptive skills looks at adaptability, social skills, leadership skills, activities of daily living, and then functional communication. And so all these specific areas are combined to the adaptive skills score, and this combined score of 43 falls within the average range. Now I'm going to break these different parts down So for adaptability, her scores did fall within the range of at risk. So during this report, you may have reported things such as she's having difficulty adapting to changing situations, taking longer to recover from difficult situations, different things like that. Maybe some challenges with flexibility, transitioning, may impact her ability to adjust to new circumstances or unexpected changes in routine. Does that still seem consistent with how you feel about Hannah? Okay. So if we look here at the social skills specific area, she scored within the average range in this area. So this just suggests that Hannah is typically demonstrating age-appropriate social interaction skills. For the area of leadership, her score did also fall here within the at-risk range. So through your reportings in this scale, may indicate that Hannah sometimes has difficulty making decisions or has trouble getting others to work effectively. You know, some of those skills that go into leadership ability. Is this still consistent with how you see Hannah? Okay. Now we come down to activities of daily living and functional communication. These two specific areas came out within the average range. So for activities of daily living, you just reported that she's demonstrating age-appropriate independence and routines, such as like self-care and other daily activities. And the same goes for functional communication as well. Do you have any questions about this part of the evaluation? Okay. Here. All right, so this part of the report just gives a summary of everything that we went over during everything that we went over in the beginning of this report. So this part talks again about her medical history, educational history, and this is just a summary of that area. This is also a summary of the testing session. This is a summary of her cognitive ability. This right here is the summary of her phonological processing. So again, those foundational skills in literacy, such as reading, spelling, comprehension. And then this is just a summary of her behavioral scores. If we move here, this is just the conclusion and supporting major findings. This is just the area of where kind of makes sense of what brought us here and how Hannah is functioning cognitively and when it comes to literacy skills, and then behaviorally as well. So again, Hannah's cognitive skills fall within overall cognitive skills fall within the average range. Her phonological awareness skills are within the average range from the CTOP, indicating adequate ability to manipulate sounds within words. Again, wanting to point out that, however, her phonological memory skills are slightly below average. And then this area here, I also wanted to point out that when it comes to rapid symbolic naming, again, going back to quickly naming letters and numbers within while being timed, that area, she obtained a combined score of 52. which falls below the first percentile. Again, going back to the scores falling within the very poor range. So within this area, I would recommend a comprehensive dyslexia screener just to get a little bit more information of Hannah's phonological processing skills. And then down here, behavioral wise, again, her general behavior when it comes to, those social skills, adaptability, externalized and internalized behaviors. Many of them fell within the average range, but the combination of withdrawal, leadership, and adaptability challenges suggest that Hannah may benefit from a comprehensive approach that addresses social engagement, coping with changes, and those leadership skills. Do you have any questions about this area so far? Okay, to kind of target the phonological process, some of those phonological processing skills and behavior, I just put some recommendations down here. So for example, some strategies that her teacher can use in class can kind of help with the phonological memory skills that we kind of talked about when it comes to memory for digits and non-word repetition. So things like allowing extended time for assignments that require rapid information retrieval, providing written directions to support the verbal instruction that she can sometimes get in the classroom, teaching memory techniques like visualization or chunking information together to help support that area. And then behavioral wise, for example, I have a suggestion down here for peer mentoring opportunities to support, maybe to kind of support the withdrawal, and then building on her social skills knowledge. So this can involve pairing Hannah with a socially skilled peer within the classroom for structured activities. So these are some of the recommendations that I have here. On this next page, just talks about the disability area. So based on this assessment, data collected and analyzed, I do not recommend Hannah for special education services at this time. Again, when it comes to the phonological processing skills, I like to learn a little bit more information in that area. And so I would like to recommend her for further dyslexia screening, just to give us a better picture of that area. Do you have any questions about this report? Okay, thank you for your time.